I can remember some of my earliest memories as just being completely kind of taken away with story, and just finding myself just completely immersed in that other world, let's say. And once someone says "once upon a time," I've always just felt myself just go somewhere different.
Yeah.
And from a language point of view, I think it's for me. Even as a child at school, I found that cold hard facts never really helped me as much as metaphor and a kind of storytelling voice.
Yeah.
um and even if you look at, you might have done this from time to time as well, but we do those cognitive tests through life, and I tend to score very, very highly in kind of the imagination and those types of realms, and actually particularly poorly on the kind of retention of facts and things like that. So I think I'm just geared that way, Walton.
Yeah.
I really am. And so for me, even when I was embarked on kind of other walks of life, story, and particularly poetry, actually, I found my way into poetry very, very early
Mm.
in my life. Other kids were outside doing different things, and I was probably, in my room reading Yeats or Rilke or something, which is, probably not the normal trajectory for most kids, but that's what I loved. And there's an underlying here that I had quite a difficult childhood. So I think in some ways, I hate to use the word escape, but it was a sense of there was a sense of freedom that I found in those pages and in those stories.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. My story is much, in many ways, I think similar. I was always engaged with stories and being read to, and things of the past. And I remember getting into, when I first learned to read, getting a book of the Greek myths out of the little grade school library and just devouring all of those, all that kind of mythic landscape. And then as an older person in university, I went and I studied theater, and I did theater. I was an actor. And so I was engaged with literature, with story, but in a very different way, in a performative way. But there is a connection. And then some years subsequently to that, I managed to run into Robert Bly as he was starting to explore the Iron John story, and I was hooked immediately because I'd never heard anyone talk about story in that way. He was coming out of a lineage of, well, Joseph Campbell was a kind of a mentor and teacher for him, and I think they were both kind of coming out of Jung's work around story, around myth and fairy tale, and all of that. But yeah, I'd never heard anyone, kind of work with story in the way that Robert was doing back then.
Mm. Well, I think on the other side of the planet, I was probably doing much the same thing. I mean, I didn't have obviously physical access to these guys, but I remember reading that book connected so many dots for me, because we've just been talking about our connection to story and poetry, but I'd never heard that sort of someone bridging the gap so beautifully into what it means to be a man from that point. And it was like, oh, I see. There's this language which seems to speak to me, and there's actually a bridge across to helping me become who I am and helping me mature into the person I'm supposed to be and put me back in touch with my soul. And it didn't. I'd never recognized that so distinctly as I did when I listened to Robert's words.
If you are interested in longer conversations of this sort, or wish to connect with the earth through the oral traditions and outdoor activity, if you desire a deeper access to the male soul, our next Minnesota Men's Conference will be October 7th through the 12th, 2025. To register or to simply get more info, go to minnesotamensconference.com. We'd like to see you there. Thank you.